And now we have with us from Yerevan, Armenia, Stepan Grigoryan, who is the chairman of the Analytical Center on Globalization and Regional Cooperation, to discuss what's happening there and what's happening in Karabakh. Stepan, thanks a lot for being with us. And really, what are the recent news? And I know you are in touch with people in Karabakh. So what is the situation there?
Now, current situation is very tension. Very hard, I say so. Periodically, we can see the ceasefire violation examples. But when we spoke yesterday, I want to say about yesterday's situation. Yesterday was a real war. Azerbaijani war against Karabakh. Today's situation is closer with ceasefire violation process. It's better than was, but not enough to finish this tension situation.
So the Armenian government says that the Azerbaijani claims that they are not fighting any longer, while the Armenian government says it's not correct. What would you say on that?
I want to say that in so type difficult situation, all sides blames each other, criticize each other. Really is very tension situation. And if we want to understand situation, it will be need to do some analysis. Who wanted to start this process, who was yesterday very close with war? Azerbaijani. Why Azerbaijan? Azerbaijan is very difficult situation. Azerbaijan wants to show the big powers in the world that Karabakh issue is not resolved. You know about Syria issue, about Ukraine problems connected with Russia aggression against Crimea, and so on. Why the Karabakh issue, in a compare of these two big issues, are small, but Azerbaijan wants to refresh situation, wants to say the world. It will be need to resolve this. In the same cases, Azerbaijan rejected to resolve snipers issues, who is very sensitive for all of us, and other issues. Why situation is hard, and started this, unfortunately so, the Azerbaijan side.
But Stepan, then what would be also the Armenian government, you know, not a benefit, but at least something? How can they use this, and how can they, you know, work with that? What could be their answer? What is their position?
No, official position is so that official Yerevans, we are agree to continue or restart negotiation process. We are agree with Minsk group's co-chairman's proposals. Many proposals arise the Minsk group in these last days. We are agree to continue negotiation process in the framework of Madrid principles, who includes all issues who arises Azerbaijan. But officially is so situation. In society, we arise and another issues. For instance, we arise issue why our government was not ready to so type development in Karabakh region. Why? You know about yesterday situation when used Azerbaijan tanks, helicopters, and Azerbaijan, you know, acknowledged that we shot down 2 tanks and 1 helicopter. It means the situation was very hard. But why is what not predictable for us? We arise this issue, but in any cases, it will be need to block this process, these developments, very negative development. It will be need to stop, and after that, restart some new positive tendencies, new positive processes.
It's very important for us also to know, because there is a very dubious information about the figures, numbers, casualties among the military and civilians. What will you know? Because somebody says there are 200 people who had been died from the Azerbaijani side. We're speaking about the military, then there is a denial, there are the civilian casualties. What we know so far?
Unfortunately, unfortunately, when started this process, Azerbaijan, they started this process, they pushed or fighting not only against the Karabakh army, but in the same time against civilians. Died one 12-year-old boy. Unfortunately, so, and we have many died soldiers, big number. In Azerbaijan cases,
when you speak about a big number, it's how many? A dozen? Because I understand it's not confirmed. But
officially, our government says, and Karabakh said about 18
okay.
18 soldiers. But in any cases, in Armenia cases, our military, the defense minister is a little open. Why we don't say this is the final number, but we believe that this number is very close with the reality. In Azerbaijani cases, you know, they close now the mass media's possibilities or limited. Why? Difficult to say how many Azerbaijanians, but on Armenian TV I saw yesterday very big number killed Azerbaijani soldiers. Unfortunately, his situation is very bad. Unfortunately, so, but big numbers. They saw us the tanks, Azerbaijani tanks, who we shot down, and yes, big numbers, and from Azerbaijani side.
And Stepan, so also we hear often that sometimes from time to time about escalation in the region. It's an old frozen conflict, and but we've also read that there was something more significant happening, something compared to how it was in the end of the war in 1994. Can you please shortly put into the context what is happening compared to all the others cases of this kind of escalations?
Process of clashing process, this whole process was very similar as was the war in 92-94. Very similar. We can say was 1 days, but was war. Was not a violence process. The sides used heavy weapons, use tanks, use aviations. Why? I want to say that situation is very terrible, very serious.
When we speak also about Karabakh, it's always, there are a lot of different sides. We often hear about the Russian influence on the region. It's definitely there in connection to the Azerbaijan and to Armenia. There were both the leaders of those republics traveling to the United States at the same time. There is always a lot of accusation on Turkey, which has a very complicated relations with Armenia and is supporting Azerbaijan. So what is on stake? What are the roles of these regional partners, Russia, Turkey, and probably somebody else you'd like to mention?
Unfortunately, this last, I speak about last 2 or 3 years, Turkish role is not so constructive. Why? Turkey every time criticizes only Armenia and helps only Azerbaijan. And so type one-side policy is not useful for resolution of Karabakh issue. And yesterday they did a statement and criticized only Armenian side. But strange was. But Russia's policy is difficult. You know better that Russia, difficult to say what that aims has today. Russia connected with Karabakh officially. They say we are ready to help us. Russia is co-chairman and so on. But different versions we listened. Maybe Russia wants to protect Azerbaijanians' membership in the Eurasian Union. Maybe Russia is now closer with Azerbaijan, not with Armenia, and so on. Many versions. But in any cases, I am, as an expert, I want to say, I am sure that this initiative to start war hard situation in Karabakh comes from Ilham Aliyev. Unfortunately, so Azerbaijan today has many different problems connected with human rights, with oil prices who diminished quickly, hardly, and so on. Maybe this whole situation did so that Aliyev risked to start this tension situation, to start this, I don't say full war, but a situation who is very close with war.
Okay, thanks a lot. That was Stepan Grigoryan, the chairman of the Analytical Center on Globalization and Regional Cooperation, talking with us from Yerevan, Armenia.
So today we have Arzu Geybullayeva, an independent journalist from Azerbaijan, joining us from Washington, D.C. Hi, Arzu. How are you?
Good. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Great. So my first question is, what's the situation on the ground now in Nagorno-Karabakh? What are you hearing?
Well, there have been statements from the Ministry of Defense. According to the most recent statement, the Ministry of Defense reported that they've seized all the military action and that they're actually working on strengthening the protection of the territories that they've taken yesterday. So officially, there is no more shooting. However, the team from the Karabakh, they're reporting that the shooting continues. So we have slightly contesting reports, official reports, and unofficial reports, but this is the situation, the current situation on the ground.
Sure, and so Azerbaijan has declared this so-called unilateral ceasefire. As far as you can tell, are there more, I suppose, ceasefire violations you could say from the Azeri side or from the Armenian side?
There have been mutual ceasefire violations. In one of the statements that came out today, the Ministry of Defense said that the Armenian side violated the ceasefire 130 times. Similar statements are coming from the Armenian side on the violation of ceasefire by the Azerbaijani side. I think if you compare, and from my conversations with experts yesterday, there is a general feeling that Azerbaijan has a tendency to violate the ceasefire first. Precisely because its territories are occupied, and that there is obviously resentment on the side of Azerbaijani government. But yeah, it's if you compare, I think they're mutually responsible.
And it's clear there have been tensions here for years, but has anything specific happened in the past couple weeks or past few months that have really led up to what happened yesterday?
That's the thing. Unlike other occasions, there's been no sort of political discussion or event that could have possibly led to this. It could be that it's just that time of the year. It's spring. Usually ceasefire violations in this context. If you remember last summer, again, it was during the summer that there were serious ceasefire violations. So it could be just the timing, because otherwise it's really difficult to make sense, especially when President Aliyev and President Sargsyan were in D.C. for the Nuclear and Security Summit, and all of this happening in their absence is slightly, it raises some questions, of course.
Sure. And have you heard, is there any sense, or could you explain, in terms of like sheer events, like how exactly this began? Who fired the first bullet? Who saw who? What happened?
Well, yesterday, at first reports, they were coming in from the villages that are really close to the ceasefire line, to the front line. There were reports that a shell from the Armenian side dropped into a home of Azerbaijani family, killing the father and blowing up the legs of the son. The son later was reported dead. But then on the Armenian side, there were reports that Azerbaijan began the fire first. So I would not dwell on who began the firing first, but I would just focus on what happened. Pretty much most of the villages across the ceasefire line were under attack, and there have been losses on both sides. Yesterday, the Ministry of Defense reported 12 soldiers died on the Azerbaijani side and 18 on the Armenian side. But Azerbaijani Ministry of Defense did say that they've taken 3 villages, and today they're working on strengthening as I mentioned earlier, strengthening the positioning and the protection of the reoccupied territories.
And internally, how is this going to play in Azerbaijan? Is it going to strengthen the current government, or is this sort of going to be viewed as a humiliation, maybe?
Well, the fact that the Ministry of Defense claims that they've taken back some of the territories is going to play, of course, into the hands of the government. The fact that the ceasefire was violated is no news, and I don't think it's going to have much effect on it. There was a Vox Pop yesterday done by Radio Free Europe, and they were asking people around what they thought about the ceasefire violations, and people actually didn't know what was happening because most of the TV channels were on their normal schedule showing shows and some other things, but not news. So if you ask me what people think in general, I would say yesterday people were quite unaware of what was happening. Today they might be more up to date if the news showed anything. But I think in general, in terms of government's popularity, given the current political context in the country, it is really hard to say that it will definitely benefit the government, because there are many other grievances, the economic crisis and democracy issues and whatnot.
Sure, and let's maybe talk about the external politics here. I mean, does Azerbaijan have any real way of appealing to the West or appealing to regional allies in a meaningful sense, or are they sort of isolated?
In terms of Nagorno-Karabakh conflict?
Sorry.
Or in general?
Oh, I mean, in terms of Nagorno-Karabakh, yeah.
Well, the main message of the Azerbaijani government to the West is that, our territories are occupied and we want this changed. They are trying to work some kind of negotiation with the West, but most of the time, I mean, there was a statement from the State Department yesterday saying that we support the a peaceful resolution to Nagorno-Karabakh. I think whatever it is, whatever appeal that they claim to the West, the West response will always be a peaceful resolution and not a military one. So this is the kind of leverage that they're using. Even though they're saying that our lands are occupied, I think they're getting the same answer over and over again.
Okay, well, thanks for taking the time to talk, Arzu. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Great, thanks a lot.